Hello, gang. Good morning. Thank you for coming. Thank you for having me. So today I want to talk about how we're going to interact with AI. And just to jump all the way to the end, my hunch is that we haven't figured that out yet. And the way we figure it out is we have to consider two other things. We have to consider how we interact together in the world. You know, you and the AI, that's already a social group, so let's think about togetherness. And then we also have to figure out, we have to think about the real world. We have to figure out kind of physical environments, what's that like. So I kind of use that as my inspiration, and I take these things and I explore things like how we interact with AI through making software sketches. And as I sketch, things change, and I learn as I go. So just to kind of get straight into it, let me show you what I mean by a software sketch. I was looking at my phone one day. This is a sketch of what the front page of my phone looks like, and I was working, and I was like, wouldn't it be good if I could see who was in all these apps I use for work before I go into them? Right? You know those little facepile things across the top of like Google Docs or Notion or Figma? That should be on the icons itself. So I drew this. And these are not like notification circles. These are like little face avatars, right? So these are little previews of who was there. And then I thought, you know, maybe the icons could be noisy if they were like really active. And so I drew this, and then I was like, no, this would be horrific, right? I have a really bad habit of looking at my phone at 4 in the morning. And all that would happen is I'd look at my phone and I would just like panic really badly. So then I thought, okay, if I have a home screen, then maybe I also have an office screen. This could be my office screen, which would be busy and show me where people are. And my home screen would be nice and peaceful. So it wouldn't show me where things were busy. And so I drew that, and then I thought, well, you know, here is me at 4 a.m. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to switch between these two screens really, really quickly anyway, because I won't be able to resist. And I will end up getting really stressed and panicky and not be able to go back to sleep. So then I thought, okay, let's put the home screen and my office screen next to each other, just the same, but instead, let's make it so I have to swipe a really long way. And gradually, as I get there, it would show me who was in the apps and like which ones were being used and where they were. And when I got there, it would be like stepping into a busy office, and there would be faces everywhere, and the apps would be noisy, and then I could like go back home at the end of the day. So I call this swipe to commute, and like I'm waiting for my email from Tim Cook, right? It's happening at any moment. And what's neat about this is I found out, like I discovered these kind of things by making the sketch. I didn't know where I was going when I started making. It genuinely happened in the order that I just explained. And it's not just a kind of a playful idea. The idea of having an entrance room really was inspired by this. This is an architecture book from a few decades ago by Christopher Alexander and a few people called A Pattern Language. And if you want to really mess with a designer, ask them whether they've read A Pattern Language, because everyone says they have, but secretly nobody has at all, because it's just too big. There are 253 patterns about how to design houses and workplaces to be really good places to occupy, and one of the patterns is this idea of an entrance room. You don't step straight from a street into the family room or the office. You have a little room you step into first, where you take your shoes off, you gather yourself, you hear how noisy it is on the other side, and from the office you can see people come into the entrance room and get ready for them to arrive. Pattern 130. And it makes me ask, why doesn't Zoom work like that? Why doesn't Google Meet work like that? Why do I not have a sense from inside the meeting that people are about to join? And I can get kind of ready for them coming in. So you see, when you're doing these sketches, you can take inspiration from anywhere. Okay, looking at AI. Mostly my experience of interacting AI is like this, ChatGPT. It's great. I use it like every day. The problem with it is it doesn't have what designers call affordances. Affordances are the little visual features that tell you what you can use it for. I mean, there are these, little hints about the different areas of things I can use it for. But when I'm working on a document or a presentation, I don't think to myself, oh, ChatGPT could be useful for this. It doesn't afford the use in those cases. So there are other ways. This is how Notion have their AI helper. What they do is they put the AI inside a little menu, change tone to professional, and that's great, right? Because you explore the menus, and you can see what the AI can do, and that gives you an idea, oh, okay, in the future, when I'm writing, the AI can kind of make me more formal later, so I can use it there. The problem with this one is it's not what I would call proactive. So when you're working with a colleague or a teammate, and you're in a Google Doc together, they will chip in when they can be useful. They'll kind of put their hand up, and they say, oh, I can help with that. So this doesn't do that. There's another pattern, which is really good autocomplete. GitHub Copilot works like this. This is by Robin Sloan, where he trained his text editor on all of 1950s science fiction literature. And he's an author, and so now he writes half with the AI, half on his own, and the autocomplete gives him ideas about where to go next. Now, this is great, right? But it's not flexible. When I think about the actual job of writing, sometimes I need an editor, sometimes I need someone to do some fact-checking, sometimes I need someone to talk through an issue and to give me kind of inspiration. This only does that one task, so it's not flexible. We should figure this out. Actually, I don't think we're in a hurry. We don't need to figure it out like this month or even this year. It's going to take a while. This is Nat Friedman, the ex-CEO of GitHub, talking about what happened with large language models and AI over the last year or so. He says that we're in a capability overhang. If we stopped all research today, says Friedman, we would still have 10 years to digest all the new possibilities. And that tracks about right for me, right? I think about the World Wide Web. World Wide Web was invented in 1990. The first commercial web browser came out in 1994. All the features we take for granted were there in 94. But it took another 4 years for people to realize that you could put a credit card number in an input box, and the submit button could say buy now, and we could have e-commerce. 4 years to realize that. It took 15 years to realize that businesses could be subscription software, and you didn't have to buy software in boxes off a shelf. So it takes a while to kind of figure out these things. So I think we can afford to take the big view. We can afford to kind of, really think through this. So how should we think through it? Well, I think the failing of the AI interaction examples I showed you just now is they all come from a paradigm of personal interaction. It's me and the AI. And maybe we could be looking at something else for inspiration instead. Where should we look for inspiration? Well, first of all, let's take a step back. Where did this paradigm of personal interaction come from anyway? Where did the personal computer come from? So what I want to do and I'm looking at the clock, the next 8 minutes is give you a history of the personal computer and where it came from. This is Vannevar Bush. So in 1940, Vannevar Bush was a research scientist, and he was made the head of all of the United States R&D effort. He was put in control of 6,000 research scientists during the Second World War. One of his projects was to show the atomic bomb was feasible, and that led to the Manhattan Project, which ended up employing 130,000 people and cost $23 billion in today's money. So that's one of his projects, right? And that was in 1945. So this gives you an idea about, Vannevar Bush as a scientist turned bureaucrat. And in 1945, he did something very, very unusual for a person in his position, which is that he wrote a magazine article talking about research science in the public. And anybody who's in kind of technology and design, if you talk to a lot of people, they kind of know about this bit of history. I just want to dig into it a bit. He wrote an article which is about how research scientists do their work. And instead of just describing science, what he did, very strange for a bureaucrat, is he invented speculative machines to help these people. So here's one machine. He said research scientists, one of the things they do is they observe. So let's pretend we have a head-mounted camera that can capture pictures while they work. Here's another thing in his article. He said, another thing that scientists do is they record their thoughts and turn them into text. So this is a machine which turns voice into data. Now, weirdly, the vocoder, which does this, was invented in 1938. But at the time that Vannevar Bush wrote this article, it was top secret. It was used for highly classified military communication in a system that wouldn't be declassified until 1985. So it's very strange that Bush was even allowed to talk about this. By the way, just also take a moment to appreciate the adverts in this magazine. The article about spanking your children suggests that they're having tantrums because you're giving them laxatives, which are too strong. The 1940s. Another advert, by the way. This one is for smokers, and their suggestion, if you smoke too much, it shouldn't be that you smoke less cigarettes, it's that you should have their special sweet to make your throat feel better. Anyway, this is Vannevar Bush's third machine. So we've got the camera, we've got the voice thing, and this is the one that made a real impact. He called it the Memex. It's a desk. It's a desk you have at home or in your office. It has two screens, and inside it has all of the world's knowledge stored on microfilm. The pages from this library are projected on the left-hand screen. On the right-hand screen, you make your own notes, where the desk photographs them and puts them into the collection. Or you can show two pages, and you can make a link between them to create what Bush called trails. It's like a prototype Wikipedia. And in fact, this went on to directly inspire the World Wide Web. You could take the trails, you could give them to other people. Anyway, so that's Vannevar Bush. His magazine article came out in The Atlantic, there, and it was republished in Life magazine, a copy of which ended up in a Red Cross hut in the Philippines. Not one of these huts, but one very, very much like this, where it was seen by this guy here, 20 years old, Douglas Engelbart, who was a radar technician in the US Navy at the time. He looked at the Memex in Vannevar Bush's article, and he looked at his radar screens on the ships, and he thought, we could do the Memex with computers. Keep in mind, at the time, computers are the size of buildings. So he goes back to the United States, studies electrical engineering, and by 1957 is in Stanford with a research group. He writes this paper in 1962 about augmenting human intellect and gets funding from the American research establishment to build a prototype, which his team does over the next 6 years. They do a demo in 1968, which is now called the mother of all demos. This is it being filmed. And this is Douglas Engelbart again, a bit older now, showing his very first personal computer. In his demo, he showed off graphical user interfaces, windows, hypertext, multiple cursors on the screen, video conferencing, all at once. And what's great about this is he used it to manage his shopping list. They invented the computer mouse. The mouse didn't exist at that point. It was the first time, this is Bill English who invented the mouse. It was also the first time the screen and the keyboard had been separated. So they worked with Herman Miller to invent office furniture. They customized an Eames chair to separate the two. Herman Miller still makes office furniture today. Imagine doing all of that in 90 minutes. Engelbart's team went on to Xerox PARC, where they developed the Xerox Alto in '73. This is the first commercial computer with a graphical UI. That inspired the Apple Macintosh in 1984. And then responding to that, Microsoft made Windows 95, which took Engelbart's ideas into the mainstream. Which gets me there somehow, right? And that turned into a smartphone, and so since 1968, we live in the paradigm of the personal computer. No wonder we interact with AIs in this kind of personal computing paradigm. Is there something else that could have happened? Was there a road not taken? Yes, there was. So here's another project around the same time. This is SAGE, the Semi-Automatic Ground Environment. Remember I said the Manhattan Project cost $23 billion. This cost $60 billion, 3 times as expensive. It was a direct response to the atomic bomb. It was built to detect nuclear bombers. So it consisted of 2,000 radar stations, airfields, and direction centers across North America. It was a prototype for the air traffic control system. It led directly to the architecture of the internet. It inspired the movie War Games, which I think is important, because that's a great movie. But let's look at how it worked, because it had some interesting characteristics. This is a direction center. So there were 24 of these buildings across the states which took in information from the radar system and coordinated the response from the bombers that would be detecting the atomic bombs and going to shoot them down and so on. Each of these buildings had inside it this. This is the, let me read my notes here, the ANFSQ7. There were 2 of these in each building. It weighed 250 tons. This is the largest computer ever built. Douglas Engelbart's team was originally funded to build a successor to this computer. So you can see how wild it was when Engelbart went, I've made a personal computer out of this, because this is what they were thinking of. This wasn't a personal computer. This was a group-use computer. Plugged into this were 100 of these operator terminals. So 100 people used the computer at the same time, from terminals such as these. So radar traces would appear on that yellow screen in the middle. The operator would use that device in the middle, which is a light gun, trust the military mind to go, how do we interact with computers? I know, how about a gun? So they use a gun to interact with that screen, and they tag it, and that information gets passed on to other people. So they're all kind of using this kind of thing together. One other weird quirk about this computer. So just on the flat piece there, on the left-hand side, can you see that little hole right in the middle? It's an ashtray. Well, it's incredible how much of computing history is about furniture, by the way. So those operator consoles were used in rooms like this. This was called the Blue Room. But this is where the analysis happens. So these are the people who are looking at all the radar traces, tagging them, and they're all using computers together. So you get a sense this is a really kind of human operation. There would have been talking and chatter going on beyond using the computers together. All that information then feeds down into this room called the pit. So this is the room for collaboration and decision-making. The information summary is projected on those large screens there. And then each of the individuals has their own console as well for their individual work. So the big screen is kind of common ground. And then the individual work lets them come up to their own point of view, and then they collaborate about whether they're going to launch the bombers or whatever. And actually, when you look at the architecture of the building, it feels a little bit like a brain, right? The pit there is on the 3rd floor. It's like the decision-making center of it all. The analysis happens over the top, where it feeds down. Coming in through the bottom is electricity, water, computer signals to the computer, which is at the base of the thing. And I have to say, when I look at this, it is a more sophisticated architecture than any of the open plan offices I've been in, or any of the software I've been using over the last few years. And there is something to me about, like, what if we had spent the last 50 years thinking about team computers and group computers instead of personal computers? Could it have looked more like this? So you can see why I'm obsessed with architecture. This, by the way, is an experimental open plan office, an office idea, where you move from a kind of a place on the right where you socialize and bump into people for serendipity, through to areas where you look at the archives of the office, into a kind of a deep work area. So it's open plan, free flow, but you move through different cognitive modes as you go. And again, this is so sophisticated. Why don't we think of software a bit more like this? I'm not saying that we should all go back to the physical environment. I really like working at home. I'm also not saying that we need to move everything into like virtual reality or anything like that, because our brains work, our brains don't need 3D environments in order to have the benefits of architecture and this kind of cognition. There's something called the doorway effect. The doorway effect is when you step through a doorway, your working memory is emptied, everything gets moved into long-term memory, and your brain blanks itself for whatever, to get ready for whatever is going on in that room. You step through the door, working memory goes, you're ready. That's why you forget what you've come into a room for when you walk up the stairs. Get this, for the doorway effect to take place, you don't need to walk into a physical doorway. It works just as well when you walk through a doorway on a screen. You just need something like that is enough to trigger it. So I don't think we need virtual reality. We just need little cues to get us thinking about moving between spaces. And those are the kind of sketches I've been doing since. So let me show you a couple of things that are in my sketchbook right now about how we interact with AIs. This is a chat room. So like ChatGPT. Hey, we should build a rocket to the moon. And the AI is going to respond to me with new ideas. The difference with this chat room, or this kind of ChatGPT interface, is there are lots of different rooms side by side, and they're inhabited by AIs, all with slightly different personalities. So whereas the last one was all about giving me really good new ideas, this one is about giving me counterpoint ideas. I'll show you another one. This one is based on the idea that AI should interact with us a bit like our colleagues. They should be like non-player characters, fake users. This I'm working on right at the moment, so it's very kind of primitive at the moment, to give you an idea. This is a multi-user whiteboard system, and I've just added a chat room on the middle. And I'm going to invite in some AIs to work with me here. So like I said, it's a whiteboard. I can scribble lines. I can draw shapes. Now let's give the AI somewhere to hang out. When you have your colleagues coming into a document, you don't want their cursors going around to distract you. We'll build a little park, and we'll invite in like a poet, a painter, and somebody who can make shapes. So these are my kind of experiments. Now let's kind of ask the poet to do something, just to demonstrate that these are kind of like AI users and not my friends, playing around. So we'll ask it now to compose a poem. Silent solar waves cut through the vast depths of blue, prey revealed, strike true. It's a proof of concept, this one, but this is plugged into OpenAI, ChatGPT, and I've asked it to compose me a short haiku about dolphins. So just to kind of prove this thing works. Let's look at another one. I said that AIs aren't proactive enough. Here's one that is proactive. What this AI does, as a demo, is it likes coloring in stars. If I draw squares, it doesn't do anything. But if I draw a star, it jumps over, and it says, oh, I can paint that. And then I say, yes, thank you very much. And it will do that. So that's kind of proactive. Let's look at one more. We'll clear the screen here. And this one, I can give instructions. So I'm going to say draw a 3x3 grid of squares, narrow gutter. Now, this is going to take some time, because what's happening in the background is I've asked this kind of fake user to do something, and in the meantime, it says, OK, I need to think about that. It's sending those instructions off to OpenAI, which I have taught how to draw on the whiteboard. I haven't told it what to draw. I've just told it it can draw shapes. And there we go. It's able to do that. So now these are beginning to feel a little bit more like my colleagues. I've invited something in which I can offload some work to. Actually, let's see if it can draw a house. We'll give it something a bit more ambitious. Draw a house using rectangles and triangles. We wait a minute while it goes and talks to the AI backend, and no, it can't draw a house. AI is not going to take our jobs quite yet. Next slide. AI as teammate. So when I think about how I work with teams, sometimes, like I said, I need an editor. Sometimes I need someone to help me with style. Sometimes I need a fact checker. Sometimes I need someone to bounce ideas across. with. But I need different people at different times. And when I start thinking about AI as teammates who can sometimes be proactive, sometimes invited in, all of my problems there are solved. And I find this by doing these sketches. I'll just show you one more thing, and then I'm going to wrap up, but I want to prove to you that sometimes these silly software sketches result in something. A couple of months ago, I made this, which is a clock I have on my shelf. It took me about 30 minutes, but it's a clock which every single minute goes and makes a new poem using ChatGPT to tell me the time. In cozy shelves I do reside. It's nearly noon, the clock confides. It's sometimes quite strange. It's almost noon, don't be a loon. Can't you see the sun shining high as a balloon? Mostly, though, it's like this. As the clock strikes 1:34, embrace this moment, treasure it more. It's like really high vibes, right? 11:51, time to be bold, minutes tick by, stories on top. It's like a LinkedIn influencer. I didn't put that in the prompt, by the way. And it does strike me, if we're using ChatGPT every day and it's being really motivational like this, what is it doing to us? Also, as the clock strikes 11:42, I rhyme the time as I always do. It was not 11:42. It fibs sometimes to make for a good poem. Anyway, it ended up in the New York Times. It went viral in India. And so now I'm going to be manufacturing this. It's going to be on Kickstarter in a few weeks. You'll be able to get your own anyway. So a little plug there, but sometimes these playful software sketches do end up in the real world. Thank you very much. This is where to find me, the clock, my studio, and my blog.